we go, part 2 of my discussion of the origins of Perpetuating Euphoria. The tautology of extermination, I think. I've been interested in the different ways that countries put people to death with the death sentence, the methods, and just, how different countries think that different methods of extermination are the most civilized. I just disagree with it totally, the death sentence. But I was also thinking about what we now call assisted suicide, assisted dying. Sorry, not assisted suicide, assisted dying. So I've been a member of the campaign for assisted dying, contributing financially to it in recent years, and that looks like it's about to go through Parliament in the UK, well, in England and Wales. And, that is how the book sort of culminates, and that's how it was always meant to culminate. It was always going to be about this guy who'd lost his brother and was torn apart by it, and the phases he went through in his mind, and his life unraveling, losing his facticity, losing the meaning of things, and saving for Switzerland is really what that's about, of course. So, thank you for the time. The idea was that he'd been saving up to go to Switzerland to end his life legitimately at a time of his own choosing, because he no longer wanted to live. And it isn't supposed to be a fantastic happy ending, although I did want the second part to be more about discovering hope, and I wanted him to face that, the character to face that with having rediscovered happiness, so that his decision to end his life clinically was one based on not on depression and unhappiness or mental health conditions, but based on actually being content, at peace, happy, hopeful, joyful. That was really important to me. A letter to my father, I think that was actually a letter that I wrote to my father, which was suggested to me by my therapist at the time, as I was having counselling for a delayed bereavement reaction after my father died. Not really sure without reading it again, but I think at least a part of it was an actual letter that I wrote. The Frog That Saved Humanity, the idea of that was really that there's a very old English mythical idea that I just heard a couple of days ago was what was in George Lucas's mind when he designed the character of Yoda. Is that there's this, the hero's walking on the road, and there's this little sort of creature that you wouldn't expect much of, and yet that creature turns out to be the all-conquering superstar of the universe, or the one that has all the power in the world. So that's where the Frog That Saved Humanity came from, and I don't know if I ever did this justice, because the final chapters I didn't write much at the time when I was going through these phases, and I only came to them much later to finish them off. And I didn't really, I had lost my mojo for this by that stage, and it was a labour to finish this book, but I had to do it, had to finish it. Which is probably why it seems a bit abrupt at the end. It suddenly comes to a conclusion, and it was never meant to be sudden, but I feel like it probably feels that way to the reader. So I'm not sure I did The Frog That Saved Humanity justice, but the other idea that was in my head was a story about this Russian chap who was a civil servant, and it was his responsibility, I believe, during the night to push the retaliation button to launch nuclear missiles if he saw incoming nuclear missiles on the radar from another country. And he saw these 3 or 4 missiles coming in on the radar one night, and he took the decision not to press the button against protocol. And he, as it turned out, although he was a mild-mannered civil servant in a low-paid job, he probably saved the Earth, because or the entirety of humanity, because they weren't real missiles. It was just an anomaly on the radar which looked for all the world like real missiles. So after he retired, he went to live in a little hovel in the middle of nowhere, out in the countryside and in the vast expanse of Russia somewhere. And young people go on pilgrimages now to go and meet him, because he's considered to be such a hero. This is the guy who didn't retaliate, even though that's what his job was to do. He made that decision, and well, yeah, it's just mind-blowing, really. Which is, yeah, so that's why lots of young people go and see him. He's totally penniless, and they go and see him just to shake his hand and meet him. Wish I could remember his name, sorry, but I'm sure you can find it on the internet. The pill or the personality. I sort of am not a fan of the contraceptive pill, birth control pill. I feel like it changes the personality of the person, and I think that could be deeply damaging to a relationship. So I have no evidence for that. It's just what I believe, a bit of a hunch, really. What else can I talk about? Not a lot, really, I don't think. There's a fair bit in there about objectifying the self, and, you know, am I subject or object, and where do I draw the divide? And how I started off writing this book was I was staring at a mug on the table, and I used to practice, I said I was a bit of a psychologist, amateur psychologist, like Timothy Leary without the drugs. And I used to practice staring at a mug to try to reorder my comprehension of subject versus object. So whereas in a Sartrean sense, where he talks about the keyhole, looking through the keyhole in the door, and for a moment he sees something through the keyhole, and his attention, his being is projected through the doorway to what he can see. And then something startles him in the background, maybe, I can't remember exactly, and he's suddenly brought back into his body, sort of about where your attention is. So yeah, subject-object domain was written about by a guy called Keegan. He was a psychologist, brilliant child developmental psychologist. I read some of his papers that were excellent, and his theory was development of children was based entirely on their perception of subject versus object, and yeah, really interesting. So that's sort of where that came from. Feelings of euphoria. I have most of my life, had this idea in mind that there must be a way to live without using recreational drugs, where you are able to perpetuate this feeling of euphoria. I'm not sure I've ever felt euphoria, but I know people have, and I'm sure that, as I understand it, when they take ecstasy they feel that way, or maybe other drugs, I don't know. So, and this was really where this idea of feeling good, I'd always had this bad feeling in my torso, I can't describe it, which now I recently discovered there's a high probability that I exhibit autistic traits and behaviours, so I've been referred for proper clinical autism assessment, but I'm now identifying as autistic, level 1 autistic. And I think it's connected to that. I'd always had this bad, sick feeling in my torso, and stomach problems can come with autism quite often. And so I suppose I was sort of in an underlying sort of subconscious way searching for feeling better. And I don't think euphoria is the same as orgasm. I think it's different. But yeah, I felt that, you know, the food deprivation thing, that's really what I was doing with that. I think I was also trying to, I like the idea of fasting 1 day a week, and I thought that actually that might enable these feelings, better feelings, and better bodily feelings, and a sense of euphoria. But yeah, I never really found euphoria myself. So, my life in the dark. Wild tiger is called Tara. Okay, I'm just going to talk about Tara now. Tara was a special woman to me. The conversations in Wild Tigress called Tara were based on real conversations. Tara was someone I met in a club, and she was really special to me. I don't know why. Just something about her in particular. I think the first thing she ever said to me, I said to her I was writing a book, and she said, "About your journey." And I said, "Yes." And she just totally got it. As soon as I walked in the room, she totally had me weighed up. She knew exactly where I was, who I was, what I was doing. I've never felt that connection with a woman before. Well, I've had different types of connections. So I wanted to do her what I hope is an honour, the honour of putting her in my book. Because she meant a lot to me, and she was someone special at a difficult time, an important time of transition. Yeah, and I don't really have anything other than that to say. I wish I'd been able to be with her. I think we actually sat next to each other on the train back from London one day. I'm sure it was her. If it was, she didn't recognise me. And I think I also saw her on the platform at Woking one day as well. Walked past her. Anyway, so she was really, if anyone was, she was my muse for this book. So she's hopefully immortalised as a wild tigress called Tara. Last thing to say really is the illustrations are by Yulia, my Russian girlfriend of some 5 years, which must have been 2012, starting 2012-ish. But she had done these drawings when I first knew her, which was while we were both studying a Masters in Business at the University of Portsmouth. She was an international student, I was an executive student, and I used to like her photographs. She was into photography, and she started doing these sort of arty architect style scribble sketches, which I really liked, and they were important in some way, and so I wanted to use them in this book. So I have used them. I've lost contact with her, but I hope and I'm sure that she won't mind that I've used them, and I have credited her in the book. and I'm going to sign off before the 15-minute limit. Bye bye.